All right, so here's the deal. I found myself tangled up in this wild affair for about 6 months. Crazy, right? It wasn't something I planned or anything. It's like one of those things that just sort of happened before you even realize it. He was something else, my lover. This guy with a grin that could honestly light up the darkest corners of any room. And those eyes, oh man, you could get lost in them. We'd meet up in the sneakiest of ways. I'm talking secret rendezvous in places you wouldn't even think of. There was this little cat cafe on the outskirts of town, tucked away from prying eyes. That was our spot. We'd sit in the back corner, sipping on coffee that was too strong, whispering and laughing like a couple of teenagers. Sometimes it was a late night drive to nowhere, just us, the stars, and the open road. It felt like we were in our little world. But let me tell you, every single time, there was this thrill, a mix of excitement and fear. Like on one hand, there's this electric buzz in the air, this feeling that you're doing something so wild, out of character. But on the other hand, there's this constant nagging worry. We were always looking over our shoulders, jumping at the slightest sound. The fear of getting caught was real. It was a rush, but it was also draining. Deep down, I always knew it was a ticking time bomb. This kind of thing, it never lasts. I mean, how could it? Sneaking around, lying, it takes its toll. But I was caught up in the moment, too far gone to really think about the end game. There were moments, brief flashes of guilt when I thought about my husband. Yeah, I had a husband. A good man, steady and reliable. We had our routine, our comfortable life. But that was just it. It was too comfortable, too predictable. This affair, it was like a jolt of electricity. It made me feel alive in ways I hadn't felt in years. But let's be real, nothing built on lies and secrets can stand for long. I think I always knew that somewhere deep down, yet I let it continue, let myself get swept up in this whirlwind of passion and excitement. It was an escape, a break from reality. And boy, did I pay the price for it. So, that's the beginning of my story. A secret affair, a life turned upside down, and a whole lot of mess to clean up. It's funny how life works, isn't it? You think you know what you want, you chase after it with everything you've got, and then when you finally get it, you realize it's not at all what you needed. But hey, that's a tale for another chapter. For now, let's just say that this was the start of a journey I never expected to take. Okay, so let me take you to this one day, the day everything changed. I started feeling like my husband was on to me, that gut-wrenching fear that just grips you. Yeah, that I felt like he was piecing things together, getting suspicious about my late nights and flimsy excuses. I was in a real jam. I figured I had to do something drastic. I couldn't just keep sneaking around. It was eating me up inside. So, I decided to drop this massive bombshell. I told him I wanted a divorce. Yeah, just like that. I wanted to be with my new love, the guy who made my heart race. Crazy, right? Now, my husband, he's the stoic kind of guy, keeps his cards close to his chest. When I told him, he just sat there, looking at me with this unreadable expression. It was like he was trying to process what I just said, but his face gave nothing away. I couldn't tell if he was heartbroken, angry, or maybe even relieved. That was the scariest part, not knowing what he felt. Telling him was one of the hardest things I've ever done. We built a life together, It wasn't all sunshine and roses, but it was our life. And there I was, about to turn it all upside down. Part of me felt guilty, like I was betraying not just him, but everything we built. But another part of me felt this relief, like I was finally being honest, at least with myself. I remember he finally spoke after what felt like an eternity. His voice was calm, almost too calm. He asked me if I was sure, if this was really what I wanted. It wasn't an accusation or anything, just a simple question. But it hit me hard. Was I sure? I thought I was. But seeing him right there, hearing his voice, I suddenly wasn't so certain. Despite my doubts, I stuck to my decision. I told him yes, this was what I wanted. It was a lie, sort of. I wanted to be with my lover, but I wasn't sure about everything else. It's not like I hadn't thought about the consequences. But at that moment, they felt distant, like they were someone else's problem. So, there it was, my decision laid out in the open. I had chosen a path, and there was no turning back. I had set in motion a series of events that would change everything. Little did I know just how much everything would change. Looking back, I realized that making that decision was just the beginning. It set off a chain reaction of events that I could never have predicted. Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs at you. And let me tell you, I was about to get a whole bunch of them. But that's a story for another chapter. For now, let's just say that this decision, as hard as it was just the tip of the iceberg. Dear readers, I hope you're as hooked on this journey as I was living it. Before we dive into the next chapter of this roller coaster story, I've got a small favor to ask. If you're enjoying this tale of love, adventure, and unexpected twists, how about showing some love? Hit that like button to let me know you're on board. It's a simple click for you, but it means the world to me. It's like a virtual high five, telling me to keep the stories coming. And hey, why stop there? Go ahead and hit subscribe too. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming up next. Subscribing will keep you in the loop, so you're always the first to know when a new chapter drops. Plus, it's a great way to support the storyteller on his quest to keep you entertained. So, take a quick second to like and subscribe. Done. Awesome. Now, buckle up, and let's jump back into the story. The next chapter is waiting, and trust me, you don't want to miss a beat of what's coming up next. Alright, so here's where things get really twisted. Picture this, I'm 3 months into my so-called new life, still trying to get my bearings, and then bam, out of nowhere, my lover decides to call it quits. And you're not going to believe this. He left me for someone younger. Yeah, talk about a cliche, right? But there I was, completely and utterly devastated. I mean, we had plans, dreams that we'd spun together late at night, whispering about the future. We talked about traveling, exploring the world, just the two of us against everyone else. It was like we were building our little fairy tale. But fairy tales don't always have happy endings, do they? When he told me, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. It was so sudden, so unexpected. I kept asking myself, how could this happen? How could he just walk away like that? But deep down, I knew the answer. These kinds of relationships, built on secrets and stolen moments, they aren't meant to last. It hit me hard, the gravity of what I'd lost. Not just him, but my entire life as I knew it. I'd left my husband, turned my back on the life we built, all for this. This illusion of love. And for what? To end up alone, feeling more lost than ever. The days following the breakup were rough. I was a mess, trying to piece together my shattered dreams. I'd look at myself in the mirror and hardly recognize the woman staring back. I had given up everything for a man who just tossed me aside like yesterday's news. The irony wasn't lost on me, I kept thinking about my husband during those days, wondering what he was doing, how he was coping with everything. There was this part of me, this tiny whispering voice that wondered if I had made a huge mistake. But pride's a tricky thing. It kept me from picking up the phone, from reaching out and trying to fix what I had broken. So there I was, stuck in this limbo of my own making. I had chased after something I thought I wanted, only to find out it was just a mirage. And now I was paying the price. This chapter of my life, it taught me some hard lessons about love, about life, and about the consequences of our choices. I thought I knew what I was doing, but life has a way of showing you just how little you know. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The story gets even crazier from here. But as for this chapter, let's just say it was a period of hard truths and even harder lessons. I had to come to terms with the fact that I had lost my husband, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. And that was a pill too bitter to swallow. Where I'm grappling with this harsh, in-your-face kind of truth, I was alone. And not just in the, I need some time away kind of way. I mean truly, utterly alone. It was just me and a truckload of memories from a life that I, in all my wisdom, had decided to blow up. Talk about a reality check. My husband, the guy I'd shared years of my life with, had turned the page. He started a new chapter. One where I was just a footnote, a thing of the past. It was like watching a movie of your life where you're no longer the main character. And let me tell you, that's a tough pill to swallow. I spent days, weeks, heck, even months trying to make sense of it all. I was living in this haze, going through the motions but not really living. My house felt like a museum of what once was. Everywhere I looked, there were reminders of the life we had built together, now just echoes in empty rooms. It's strange, when you're left alone with your thoughts, you start to really dive into the choices you've made. And boy, did I dive deep. I replayed every argument, every sweet moment, every crossroad where I could have chosen differently. But the thing about the past is, it's like a different country. You can't go back. I tried to reach out to friends, but it was awkward. They had all chosen sides, and guess what? Most of them weren't on Team Me. I don't blame them, really. From the outside looking in, I was the villain of my own story. I had walked away from a good man, a stable life, for what? A fling that fizzled out faster than a cheap firework. Night after night, I'd sit by the window, looking out at the world moving on without me. People going about their lives, laughing, loving. And there I was, stuck in this self-made purgatory. It's in moments like these that you really start to question who you are, what you want, and what really matters in life. The harsh truth that I had to face was that I had done this to myself. I had chosen this path, and now I had to walk it, no matter how thorny it was. My husband, the man I thought I'd grow old with, was now a stranger, living his life without a backward glance. This chapter of my life, it was all about coming to terms with the consequences of my actions. It was a time of reflection, of understanding the ripple effect of the choices we make. I had to learn to live with myself, with the knowledge of what I had done, and somehow find a way to move forward. And trust me, moving forward wasn't easy. It was a journey full of bumps and bruises, of learning and unlearning. This is where I hit rock bottom, where the harsh lessons really start to sink in. By this point, I'd lost it all: my husband, my lover, even my sense of who I was. I was back to square one, but with a whole new set of baggage, a heart heavy with regrets, and a mind swirling with what ifs. They say hindsight is 20/20th, and boy, were they right. Looking back, I could see all the missteps, all the wrong turns I took. It's like this montage of mistakes playing over and over in my head. I lost the love of a man who had stood by me through thick and thin, for a fleeting romance that burned out faster than a shooting star. And here's the kicker: I didn't just lose them, I lost myself in the process. I used to know who I was, what I stood for. But after everything that went down, I couldn't even recognize the woman staring back at me in the mirror. I was a stranger to myself, and that, my friend, is a scary feeling. It's funny, in a not so funny way, how life can turn on a dime. One minute you think you have it all figured out, and the next, you're scrambling to pick up the pieces of a life you shattered with your own two hands. The world keeps spinning, but you're stuck, trapped in a past that you can't change, in a future that looks nothing like what you had planned. The thing about hitting rock bottom, though, is that it gives you a different perspective. You start to see what really matters, what's truly important. It's not the whirlwind romances or the adrenaline rush of sneaking around. It's the quiet moments, the steady love, the things I took for granted and lost along the way. In those long, lonely nights, I find myself replaying everything, wondering how I could have been so blind, so reckless. I was racked with guilt, drowning in a sea of remorse. I kept thinking about all the what ifs. What if I had stayed? What if I had been honest with myself and my husband from the start? But life doesn't have a rewind button. You can't go back and erase your mistakes, no matter how much you wish you could. So there I was, at the bitter end of my own making. It was a tough pill to swallow, accepting that I had no one to blame but myself. I had to learn to live with my choices, to find a way to make peace with the chaos I had created. And trust me, that journey to peace, to finding myself again, it was a long and winding road. But that's a story for another day. For now, let's just say that Chapter 6 was about coming to terms with the consequences of my actions, about learning the hard way that some choices can't be undone, and some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. It was the end of one chapter and the reluctant beginning of another, a chapter where I had to learn to forgive myself and start over, one painful step at a time.